Hello and welcome to the latest episode of Empire Sports Talk. I am your host, Roman Gennaro. We have a lot to cover, so let's get right to it. Tonight is Game 6 of the World Series between the Indians and the Cubs. The Indians are up 3-2, so if the Indians can win tonight, that's it. They'll be World Series champions for the first time since 1948. But a Cubs win in Cleveland with Jake Arrieta on the mound would mean the Cubs would force a Game 7 to be played in Cleveland on Wednesday. So we'll have to see how that goes. But I said I wanted to jump right into it, so I'll get to my first topic. I think that the best thing for baseball, and I really, really hate to say this, and I'm sorry for all my friends that are Cubs fans, all my friends that are from Chicago, because I've been rooting for the Cubs to this point. I like the Cubs. But the best thing for baseball are the Cubs losing the World Series, whether it be tonight or in Game 7. Because baseball is seen as a slower sport. It's seen as a more methodical sport. There's a lot of moving pieces, a lot more players to keep track of than in other sports. And the Cubs not winning a World Series in 108 years is the biggest story that baseball has. It's one of the biggest stories that baseball has had the whole time. And if the Cubs were to win the World Series, that would be over. We have to find a new story, and there's just not that many stories in baseball that are that captivating 100% of the time. The ratings for Game 6, the ratings for Game 5 beat the NFL, and was one of the things that finally beat any election coverage, anything like that. The ratings for Game 5 beat the NFL. Nothing beats the NFL, and the reason that this World Series is so high, the ratings for this World Series is so high, is because of the Cubs. If it was the Indians and the Dodgers, nobody would be watching. If this was the matchup next year, it was the Indians and the Cubs won, had won this year, no one would be watching. They're watching because of the Cubs, and they're watching the Cubs because the Cubs have lost for so long. So if the Cubs win, that is over. What's baseball's biggest story at that point? Baseball has finally started to get viewers. It's finally started to get people to watch, and it's because of the Cubs winning. But if they win at all, if their drought ends, possibly so do those ratings. So I think that the Cubs losing could be good for baseball as a whole, and it hurts me to say that because I love the Cubs. They're one of the teams I enjoy watching the most. Even when they weren't winning, they're just a likable organization, likable fans, great city. And so it hurts me to say, but the Cubs losing the World Series would be the best thing for baseball at this point. Another interesting story that I heard this week was Cam Newton. He's been getting hit a lot. He's had a concussion already this year, or a fear of concussion. He's been getting a lot of helmet-to-helmet hits, a lot of things, and understandably, he's not too happy about it. He's trying to get a meeting with Roger Goodell regarding some of the hits that Cam Newton believed were illegal on him, helmet-to-helmet and those kind of hits that aren't allowed in the league. And he's not too happy about it. But what was interesting to me is he held a press conference after one of the games where he had gotten hit like he has so many times this year. After Sunday's win against the Cardinals, he held a press conference. He said where he said something to the effect of, "I'm afraid to go out there. I don't want to go out there because I know I'm going to get hit. I know I'm going to take these hits," and he said he was scared to go out there. Those were his words. I understand that being hit is not fun. It's something you avoid doing in football because football is a violent game, and if you get hit a lot, it can be unpleasant. But here's the issue with that, is that Cam Newton is the largest quarterback, body size-wise, in the NFL. Him and Ben Roethlisberger. And those are two guys that are really hard to officiate. because it takes so much more force to bring those guys down, Cam and Ben. It takes so much more force to bring them down. Not so much more, but it takes more. It physically does. To bring them down than to say bring down Drew Brees, bring down Russell Wilson, bring down guys like that, because of how big and imposing they are. So referees have to hold them to a different standard because they're larger, because defenses have to do different things to get them to the ground. So yeah, there are going to be some calls that Big Ben or Cam Newton believes should be called that are not called, because the referees are trying to figure out what's good for these guys, what's not good for these guys. But what the referees call and what they don't call, that's what they do. But what Cam Newton was doing in the press conference was saying, I'm scared to go out there. I don't want to go out there. This doesn't sound like a guy that's enjoying football. This is a guy who's been in the league 6 years, and he's already complaining about being out there every Sunday. He's already complaining about football not being fun. This is a guy that we saw when he came out of the league that had potential to be one of the best the league had ever seen. And 6 years in, he's talking about, it's not fun. I don't enjoy the way this is. Blah blah blah. It sounds like he's trying to find a way out. He sounds like he's close to retirement, which is interesting. But I don't understand the surprise. He says, "Oh, I'm scared to go out there. Oh, it's violent. You're gonna get hit. You signed up to play football. That's not, that shouldn't be a surprise to you." I mean, granted, there are a lot of hits that are not calls that are not going Cam Newton's way. I've seen a few that should have been called for him. He's getting beat up. But as a defense, if you're playing, Atlanta or New Orleans, whoever's coming up on Carolina's schedule is going to look at that and say, "Oh, he's scared. Let's scare him even more. Oh, he doesn't want to go out there. Let's try to push him to the limit." You're fueling the teams that you're going to be playing, and you're disheartening your own teammates, because your own teammates could possibly hear it as, "Oh, he doesn't want to be out there with us." Or the offensive line could be like, "Oh, he blames us." Or the defense could be like, oh, we're not making stops, so we have to send him out there. But that's his job. He's the quarterback. Don't go out there, complain about officiating, and say you're scared to be out there, because football's a violent game. You're going to get hit, but your teammates need you. They need you to be there and be ready and lead them. They need you to be a leader, and he does not sound like a leader right now. He sounds like a child. That's rude. He sounds like somebody that is scared, which he's allowed to feel. But in a league, playing a position that has so much notoriety, so many press conferences, so much media attention, you have to be careful of what you're saying, because if your teammates could be listening, your opponents could be listening, your fans could be listening, and it could hurt you. And I get that he's gone through a lot this year, physically, mentally, but that's not something for him to go out there and say, "I don't want to be out there," because that's disheartening for everyone, his teammates, and the fans too. The only ones that get anything good out of it is the defense, because they're like, "Oh, we can get in his head easily." That's great. So I don't know why he would go and get up at a podium and put himself on display and say, "Yeah, I'm scared. Come get me," because that's basically what he's saying is look out. I don't want to be there. So that's interesting. We'll have to see how he plays the rest of the year. Tom Brady missed the first 4 games of the season and has now played 3 games. And in those 3 games, he looks like no doubt the MVP, which is terrifying if you have to play the Patriots at this point. Tom Brady, by the time he retires, and he's somebody that opposite of Cam Newton has played for 17 and sounds like he could play for another 6-7 years if his body holds up. That's how you should act as a quarterback, that you could play until you just physically can't anymore. But in the first 3 weeks that he's played, he is no doubt the MVP of this league. And if that continues, it's shocking that somebody could win MVP and only play 12 games. That's how good he's been this year. His replacements, Jimmy Garoppolo, Jacoby Brissett, did their jobs when they were needed. But that team is Tom Brady's team. And to have him back the way he is playing, I don't see anybody that can stop the Patriots. I think there's no question that the Patriots will be at least in the Super Bowl. There's no telling who they'll face yet. The Cowboys, the Vikings, Falcons, Packers. Who knows who they'll be facing? But I think there's no doubt at this point that they will be playing in the Super Bowl. So it's terrifying in a good way for fans, but in a bad way for opponents. How good Tom Brady and the Patriots are right now. So he's at this point in the season. I've said in the last couple of weeks that there are a lot of MVP candidates: Julio Jones, Matt Ryan, Derek Carr. But to me right now, because of the limited number of games and the way they're playing, Tom Brady is the guy that is my MVP so far. So it's mind-boggling actually to look at his stats and to look at how the team is playing. And I was shocked that they did so well without him that they did. They went 3-1 before he came back. But the fact that they are still they're undefeated since he came back, and they're winning pretty sizably. I think they scored 45 points a couple of weeks ago. Those are MVP numbers right there. There was a thriller this last week in the NFL between the Falcons and the Packers. The Falcons ended up winning 33-32 in that game with a last final minute touchdown. I don't know what's up with the Falcons, man. Those are two teams that played in that game that are very interesting to me. Everybody knows last year the Falcons started 5-0 and then finished 8-8, and so when they started 4-1, it was like, okay, let's see what happens. And the Packers' offense has been a mystery, and up until this week's game, they looked really bad, and the defense has so many injuries, and you name it, it's gone wrong there. And so this week's game was very interesting. The Falcons had come off 2 losses that should have been wins. The Falcons know that they should have come into that game 7-1, 6-1. They should have come into that game 6-1, and they weren't. They came into that game 4-3, because the last 2 weeks they had fourth quarter leads against the Seahawks and the Chargers, respectively. And they decided to throw the ball. Matt Ryan throws an interception, and in the other team's territory, and they went and they scored, and they would end up winning. I know I just described 2 games with one story, but it was literally the same story in those games, and it was concerning because Dan Quinn is supposed to be a defensive coach by trade. He defense with Seattle. But I haven't seen much defense from the Falcons this year. Even in the win against the Packers, they had a fourth quarter lead. They let it slip. They ended up winning, but they still allowed 32 points. So I'm not sure what's going on there. I'm glad they were able to win for their sake to stay on top of the NFC South. But their defense has got to figure it out. As good as their offense is, their offense deserves a good defense at this point. So I don't know what's going on. Alright, it's time once again for Romans Ridiculous 6. Let's get started. Romans Ridiculous 6. Here we go. Number 1. NFL overtime rules. In the last 7 days, this Sunday and last Monday, last 7 days, there have been 2 ties and 1 game that was that close to one. Last Sunday night, Seattle and Arizona. Monday night. Was that Sunday or Monday? I don't know. Last week, Arizona and Seattle tied at 3. This Sunday in London, the Bengals and the Redskins tied at 27. And then later in the afternoon, the Bucks and the Buccaneers and the Oakland Raiders went to overtime and were about a minute and a half from the 3rd tie in 2 weeks and the 2nd tie of that day. There are a lot of people, sportscasters, friends that I know, that have differing opinions on overtime rules. Some believe they're fine. Some believe they should go to college rules. I am one that believes it should be college rules because ties are ridiculous. Every single sport has a resolution for a tie. In basketball and baseball, it's not possible. And as far as the full game is set up. Now, in baseball, it's possible for a game to go into extra innings, and then the rain would fall, or the rain would start coming, and you'd have to delay it. But even so, you usually delay it until a later date where you finish it, so that somebody gets the win or the loss or whatever. There are no official ties in baseball. There are no official ties in basketball. There's no way to tie in basketball. You keep going until there's a winner. In college football, they have the shootout, where you go to overtime, and each team gets the ball for an untimed possession from the 25. You score, and you go until somebody wins. In soccer and hockey, you have an overtime period. If nobody scores, you go to shootouts. And in those shootouts, whoever wins. Those sports, they might classify those as ties, but somebody still won, whether it be in overtime or in a shootout. Somebody still won. So for the NFL, America's game for some people, to be the only sport that really officially can end in a tie is ridiculous. I believe that college rules should be adopted because people say, oh, we don't want them to go past one overtime because it's a 15-minute quarter. We don't want them to play 90 plays, whatever. You'd probably play fewer plays if you adopted college rules because you'd be on the 25. You'd only get about three shots before you'd have to score a touchdown or kick a field goal, and the other team would do it. I think it actually would go by quicker than a 15-minute overtime period because you're playing an extra 15 minutes. You already had played 60. You're playing 75 minutes, and 75 minutes, and there's no guarantee of anybody scoring. So you're telling me that you don't want to do college rules because of the extra plays, because of having a team play 90 plays or whatever, but you're okay with them playing 75 minutes. You're okay with them playing an extra 15 minutes and nothing happening. That's silly. And the fact that there's been 2 of these and 1 near miss in 7 days when ties really didn't happen. I don't think I saw my first tie in the NFL until I was 12 or 13 years old. I didn't know they were possible because they never really happened. There's maybe 1 every 2 or 3 years. But this year and last year there was 1. This year there's now been 2, close to 3. And we're only halfway through the season. Something's got to change. Will it change? I don't know because the NFL only changes the rules they want to change. But I seriously believe that the NFL needs to change their overtime rules because their overtime rules are, you guessed it, ridiculous, and that is why they're on this list. Number 2, This is a little bit old, but I still think it's ridiculous. I haven't gotten a chance to talk about it. Ryan Fitzpatrick comments about his coaching staff after he was benched in week 7 for Geno Smith. Week 7. He's leading the league in interceptions. He had 11 through 7 games. 11 through 6 games, however many games at this point, and he was benched for Geno Smith, and they said, oh, well, Geno's going to start. He's going to be named the starter. Ryan Fitzpatrick gets up to the podium and says, he feels bad. He feels like his coaches have lost confidence in him. Basically voicing his displeasure with his coaches and saying that it is very disheartening, saying that, it's a slap in the face, basically, is what he said, to be benched. Okay, first of all, those are your coaches. If you talk bad about them, they can cut you. They can let you go. And you haven't really given them much reason to keep you around. 2, what do you expect? Ryan Fitzpatrick is a guy that's played for so many different teams. The Texans, the Jets, the Bills, the Titans, to name a few of them. He is a journeyman. He has not been with a team for more than a few years in his league, in the NFL. And so, him more than anybody as the quarterback should understand that if you don't do the job, you will be replaced. So I don't understand why he basically pitched a fit over being benched by his coaches. And Of course, they lost some confidence in you. You lead the league in interceptions. Nobody turns the ball over more than you. Of course, they lost confidence in you. The team's not winning. You're not helping. What do you expect? Go out there, do your job. If you can't do your job, you're gonna get sat. You're gonna get replaced, and that's what Ryan Fitzpatrick did. I think his comments were ridiculous. Number 3. And we're still in the NFL. NFL players versus officials. I already said a little bit about Cam Newton getting up there, blaming officiating, the lack of flags on him, and all this sorts of stuff. And we've had a few incidences of that where coaches want to blame officiating. Players want to blame officiating. Josh Norman got up after one of their games and legitimately called out a certain referee. Referee, I forget his name, but he was wearing the number 88 in the game. He made a call that Josh Norman didn't like. Josh Norman gets up after the Redskins game and says, "Who's number 88? What is his name? What is his name?" And after a pause, he says, "He sucks." Calling out this guy. Okay. I got a real problem with that. And I think it's because of this Colin Kaepernick stuff where these players have suddenly got all this confidence to think they're untouchable, they can do what they want. And I realize the Kaepernick thing was the social stand for social injustice, but now you're giving guys that already have big egos an idea that no one can touch them, that no one can tell them not to do something. And it's not great. So what I don't and you're acting like these players are acting like referees can do whatever they want without any fear, without any risk to their jobs or anything. Referees have a union that they're in, have a group that they're in, have supervisors, have fines, have things just like players do. And if they don't do their job, they can be asked not to continue officiating, to be reassigned or released from their contracts, whatever. So referees have as much incentive to do their job as players. They don't get paid as much. They're never appreciated. And so they have no reason to walk around and doing whatever they want. They have to be there to do their job, or else they lose that job. Like anybody else's job. Referees are the most normal people in the entire league. Because players can mess up. Players can get fined. Players can say stupid things. Ryan Fitzpatrick. But they're still going to hang around. They're still going to have that job. They're still going to get paid the ridiculous money to do that job. Referees aren't. Why do you think they went on strike a few years ago because they're underappreciated, and they knew that, and they needed compensation, and they needed this, they needed that, whatever. So for players to come after officials and to say things about officials that are disparaging, for Josh Norman to call one guy out in particular, that is embarrassing for that guy, and that is unacceptable. These NFL players need to realize that, yes, they are the names, yes, they are the big bucks, yes, they are the players, but they answer to someone. They answer to their bosses. They answer to referees because referees, at this point, technically have more power than they do. Don't make them mad. Do not call them out. And do not give them a reason to dislike you. Because former players have come out and said they've had feuds with certain referees, and those certain referees won't make calls in their favor. Is that right? No, but just stay away from referees. Don't go after them. It's not fair to them, and it makes you look like a jerk. So NFL players going after officials is ridiculous. Number 4, Case Keenum is still starting for the LA Rams. In their game last week against the Giants, Case Keenum threw 4 interceptions in the loss to the Giants. And after the game, head coach Jeff Fisher said, Case Keenum will still be our starter. Jared Goff isn't ready. And Case Keenum is not on this list because of Case Keenum. Case Keenum is on this list because of his backup, Jared Goff. Now, if your team isn't playing well, and your quarterback throws 4 interceptions, loses a game, looks as bad as Case Keenum did. I believe he was 26 for 53. A pretty bad completion percentage. Not a great game. 4 interceptions, unacceptable. And for the coach to come in and say Jared Goff still isn't ready, your number 1 pick, your $1 million man, still isn't ready. If it's 6, 7, 8 games in, 8 weeks in, your team is struggling, and your first round, number 1 overall pick, highest paid guy in the draft, is not ready. Especially with guys like Carson Wentz, Trevor Siemian, Dak Prescott, these young guys coming in doing everything. If your number 1 overall pick isn't ready at this point, what does that say about you guys? What does that say about him that he should not have been the number 1 overall pick to begin with? For Case Keenum to perform as bad as he is and still have the job over a healthy Jared Goff because Jared Goff is not ready? Why did you pick him? I was the one, I've been very vocal about the fact that I believed that the Rams should have gone Wentz with the first overall pick. That if it were me, I would have gone Wentz. That Wentz was the best quarterback in that draft. Where is Wentz? Philadelphia. What is he doing? He's starting. Dak Prescott was picked in the 4th round. Where is he? Dallas. What is he doing? Starting. Trevor Siemian, his second and third year, second or third year in Denver, nobody had high hopes for him. Where is he? Denver. What is he doing? Starting. Derek Carr, 3rd year. Jameis Winston, 2nd, 3rd year. Marcus Mariota, same thing. There's no excuse for a guy that you draft not to be ready. Especially if he's a quarterback, and especially if he's the first overall pick. That is ridiculous. Get him ready or let him go. That's really to the Rams. That has nothing to do with Case Keenum. But he was the head of the story, so that's why he was. But it's more about the Rams and Jared Goff. The Jacksonville Jaguars continue to be less than impressive. And I went to school in Jacksonville. I live in Jacksonville, and many of my friends are Jags fans. And I feel bad for them because they're loyal. You'll give them that. But they're loyal to a team that they shouldn't be. This would be the one team where them and Cleveland, the 2 teams where it'd be acceptable to just give up on them. No matter what they do. Bad coaching decision. Gus Bradley should have been fired weeks ago. Blake Bortles, their first round pick, hasn't really done much. He's improved incrementally over the 3 years that he's been here in Jacksonville. And he had probably I think that was his career high in yards, 337. He had a great week for fantasy owners, 42 points in one of the leagues that I was in. And they still lost. They still got demolished by Tennessee, and they still only scored 22 points to Tennessee's 36. And going back to say Dan Quinn is a defensive coach, so is Gus Bradley. There's 36 points to a Tennessee team that isn't all that good. The only reason Gus Bradley and Tennessee's coach have jobs is because they're the only ones that can beat each other. Those are the only wins they get is each other. So it's not like they played Atlanta. It's not like they played Dallas or New England. They played Tennessee and they got smoked. They gave up 36 points. They only scored 22. And despite Blake Bortles finally looking decent, actually he didn't. From what I saw and from what my friends told me, he still played awful. But he actually produced some numbers. To still produce those numbers and to still look that bad? Give up! Blake Bortles isn't the guy. Gus Bradley isn't the guy. I'm not convinced Shad Khan is the guy, but he's the owner. And he's got more money than anybody ever. Not really, but still. He's got so much money. Who's going to replace him? He's not going anywhere. But everybody else can and should. The Jacksonville Jaguars are ridiculous. Number 6 in Roman's Ridiculous 6. It is a little bit of an older story too, but it's still ridiculous. Russell Westbrook getting into it with a 76ers fan during their game against Philadelphia. Now, the game was in Philadelphia, and apparently the 76ers fan flipped the bird to Russell Westbrook, but that is not the whole story. Apparently, Russell Westbrook was coming out of the tunnel, and the 76ers fan was heckling Russell Westbrook. Russell Westbrook apparently made some comments about the man's weight, and so the man gave Russell the bird. It's an unfortunate exchange, and the 76ers fan apologized, but I don't think he's the one that should be apologizing. Yes, he did heckle Russell Westbrook, but he's the fan. It's his arena, like it's his team's arena. Isn't that what you're supposed to do? To heckle the fan, or to heckle the opposing players? He probably could have been a little friendlier, but isn't that what you're supposed to do, is to give the other players a hard time? I don't think there's anything wrong with heckling a player. Now, if Russell Westbrook said something about the man's weight, that's what I have a problem with going too far. Russell is a professional basketball player. I get that professional in this sense means he gets paid, and boy does he get paid. But professional also means to be one, to be a professional, to let it go. His former teammate Kevin Durant has let everything that's ever been said about him get to him. And look what's going on with him. The Golden State Warriors are struggling with chemistry. Kevin Durant stayed in his bed for 2 days after signing with Golden State because he didn't want to face the public. You gotta have a thick skin if you play professional sports. And to say something as unflattering and unkind as making a comment about a man's weight, just go do your business. Just go put the ball in the bucket and get paid the money that you probably don't deserve because the money in professional sports is ridiculous. And then for the man to flip him the bird, yeah, that wasn't great. That wasn't the best option. That was an obscene gesture. But a professional basketball player that I'm sure he looked up to despite the heckling because of how good he is, called him a name about his weight, insulted him, so he reacted. The whole situation was unfortunate. The whole situation could have been avoided. But I don't think, and the man apologized. I don't think Russell Westbrook ever did. I'll have to check on that, but I don't think Russell Westbrook ever apologized for his part in that. So the fact that it's a story, the fact that Russell Westbrook, I don't know if I've said Wilson a lot, but Russell Westbrook, was involved in this and played the role that he played is the ridiculous part. That's all for Roman's Ridiculous 6. Now we move on to Emperor of the Week. As you know, Emperor of the Week is where I hand out an award, a fake award, but an award for the best performers of the previous week. And there were so many options. This was the hardest time I've ever had picking an Emperor of the Week. Let's start with honorable mentions. Derek Carr threw for a franchise record 513 yards in the Oakland Raiders win against the Buccaneers. He was in consideration. Tom Brady, with as good as he looked, had a great game with 4 touchdowns for the Patriots. Corey Kluber is 2-0 in this World Series for the Cleveland Indians, and the Indians are 1 game away from a championship, and if the series goes to 7 games, we'll probably see Kluber again. But despite all of those choices, I still had to go with co-emperors of the week. So there are 2. The co-emperors of the week are Anthony Davis of the New Orleans Pelicans and Russell Westbrook, previously mentioned. The reason why I chose those 2 guys is both teams have played 3 games. The Thunder and the Pelicans have played 3 games so far in this young NBA season. Here are their stats, and they're weirdly similar. Anthony Davis, through the first 3 games, 37.7 points, 12.3 rebounds, 3 blocks in the first 3 games. The first 2 games, 50 and 45. Russell Westbrook, 38.7 points, 12.3 rebounds, 11.7 assists in the first 3 games. The only difference here is that the Pelicans are 0-3, the Thunder are 3-0. Those stats are incredibly similar. Russell Westbrook has the edge in points by only 1 point and has the exact same amount of rebounds as Anthony Davis. Their stats alone were the reasons why they are my Emperors of the Week. The first 3 games, what they're doing for their teams is crazy. So congratulations to Anthony Davis and Russell Westbrook for co-MVPs of the week, and everybody else that was a candidate. This was the toughest week so far to pick that award. That is all the time I have for this week for Empire Sports Talk. This is your host, Roman Gennaro. Game 6, Cubs-Indians in Cleveland tonight at 8 o'clock. Check it out. This is Roman Gennaro signing off. Have a good week.